I'm doing differently is, again, my women touch, I would say, is opening our activities to a wider market. Before I arrived, the policy in the company was much more product focused. So we wanted to be the ambassador of Lao coffee, promoting the quality of our coffee, national commodity. And now I'm also taking into account other market factors. Coffee is becoming part of a lifestyle. Not only coffee connoisseurs drink coffee. People go to coffee shops because it's a place where you meet friends, where it's a social place. And so now, listening to the market as well, I realize that in Vientiane and in Laos, families are very important, and they are in need of places where they can go, where they can drink some coffee, meet their friends, and at the same time, leave their children, play in a safe environment. So that's another dimension that I took into account a few months ago, like 2 years ago, to implement this new direction into the company, not only being product-focused, but also being a bit more family-focused and taking into account these new segments.
Yeah, so as you've heard the introductory comments on how these women leaders have had to make their mark, how are they dealing with the challenges, and what can we all learn from them? First of all, from where you sit, Dr. Akhtar, as more women join the workforce, what measures are you trying to implement so that more and more women get out there and work? Are there some transformative measures in place?
Yes, I think, of course, the situation or the analysis, diagnostics varies from country to country, and sometimes, of course, there are some special initiatives that are needed in the country context. But I would say there are 2-3 things which are absolutely essential. The first is, of course, that there is this massive new and unfolding wave of ICT-centric innovations that is going on. So if we are talking about how to transform the involvement of women and how to transform businesses, it's important that we equip these regions more effectively in this context. According to some estimates, such innovations could boost ASEAN's GDP also from anywhere from 220 billion to about 700 billion or so. So it has added benefits. But of course, this means that we have to go beyond addressing the question of the equal or unequal access to ICT technologies to actually developing policy frameworks that realize the potential of women as innovators. So you have to twist these things more effectively. Of course, we do know that underpinned by the ASEAN integrated economic community, we also have the traditional sectors reconfiguring themselves into ICT-driven integrated ecosystems. Of course, this requires much more hand-holding of getting women integrated in this process of a new ecosystem, because it doesn't automatically come through. Besides, of course, the innovation revolution and its attendant benefits, as I see, there's also this whole area of financial access. We do know that a lot of women are underserved, particularly in low value added sector or informal sector, from access to finance. And there is a range of innovation in the financial sector that is happening, partly also driven by the ICT revolution, which could benefit and go for more wider scale and enhance the reach to women beneficiaries.
So in the case of Malaysia, Datuk, it's certainly the case that more women are becoming entrepreneurial. President Moon Jae-in just highlighted the importance of disruptive economies. As we live in this part of the region, we can see for ourselves what the disruptive businesses are doing to transform businesses that we know. In the case of Malaysia, how did you feel about the fact, whether it's man or a woman, Grab, for instance, is probably the single most important disruptive business aside from a few other unicorns in the region. It's founded by a man and another woman. When they decided to seek regional expansion, they decided to move to the other side, Singapore. Do you sometimes hit yourself in the head? What can you do about it to keep disruptive businesses at home?
I don't just hit myself in the head, I kick myself again. Yeah. Because they are Malaysians, hot-blooded Malaysians, if we want to talk about Grab Taxi. Then, way back in 2010, when they came back from US, they met me. We assisted them to help to start a company. But at that time, people don't believe in ideas. People still were looking into bankable projects that the banks and the VCs wanted to take equity in. And for my agency, I can only help them so much. Even putting them through a program called Pitch It Right with the VCs and the bankers, we were not able to get funding for them, and that's why they crossed over the causeway and got funding from Singapore. Now, what's interesting to see is that as we talk about disruptive technology today, increasingly, as we move into these mega trends, what I'm seeing is the fact that there is an increasingly female entrepreneurship that comes into being. And why I'm saying that is because, for example, recently when we launched the DFTZ, which is the Digital Free Trade Zone together with JECMA in Malaysia, we saw that a good number of women are on DFTZ. It's easier to convince women to do business online than, to convince men. What we're seeing also is the fact that when these women moved into online businesses, things like we gave birth to Fashion Valley, for example, and we gave birth to things like Nilofa. These are the powerhouse of women entrepreneurs who are successful in Malaysia in terms of this disruptive technology that's putting a lot of retailers now a run for their money. And what's interesting is also how the banks respond to this kind of technologies. We in Malaysia, we have got what you call fintech, which is crowdfunding is now becoming very, very popular. We've got the first 6 crowdfunders that have been, registered. And these crowdfunders now are assisting startups, high-tech startups, to quickly put their business onto the mainstream and be able to bring it up, prop it up, and develop their business as soon as possible. So the time lag for these startups using crowdfunding is able to facilitate not just women, but the whole startup ecosystem and give it a different, landscape altogether in the Malaysian startup business. And we're seeing more women going into that field.
So in terms of disruptive technologies, in your line of the industry, disruptive technologies such as ride sharing can discourage people from buying a car. You also have autonomous vehicles, you have electric vehicles, and possibly flying taxis. And maybe the business of selling cars could become obsolete. How are you dealing with these speed bumps that could really make you go out there, fight not only the gangsters in Batangas, but how do you fight all the gangsters around the world in the tech disruption space?
I like the word, speed bumps, okay? The auto industry, like many industries, is now on the edge of significant change because there's a perfect storm of technological influences such as big data and analytics, with cloud computing, the socialization of business through mobile devices, and most importantly, what we call the IoT, or the Internet of Things. Let me just put it on record that global car sales will continue at a speed of 3% over the next 5 years, but by 2030, things will change because it's going to drop to about 2% based on study because of the car sharing and e-hauling. In the Philippines, we would likely maintain this double-digit growth, but by 2030, we have to rethink also ourselves. No? Now, there are emerging trends or speed bumps in the auto industry. I attended a seminar and the question of the professor was, is the car connected to the driver, or is the driver connected to the car? So nobody tried to answer, but there has been changing consumer mobility behavior right now, and this is also hampered by tightening regulation, traffic and technological breakthroughs, and up to the shift that even individuals will have their own preferences. In the future, they may want flexibility to choose the best solution for their car. What if I tell you that there's going to be an Apple car soon, an Amazon SUV, and a Google van? What will we do? What if there is a technology that offers, you buy your grocery online, you pay it online, and during that pre-planning workshop, the moderator said, then Amazon will offer delivery to your trunk. Will you buy it or not? So consumers now have been changing even around the world in their shares of in the car sharing business, because even in the US, those that hold driver licenses dropped from 76% to 71% in 5 years. And in Northern America and in Germany, car sharing has already increased annually by 30%. Now, this is even challenged by fully autonomous vehicles. So the issue is, are we ready for ADAS or the advanced driver assistance systems, which will play a crucial role in preparing regulators and consumers? Imagine if this ADAS is in front of us already and the market penetration issues are resolved, and these issues will only be on pricing, consumer understanding, and security issues. And once these are resolved, this will be the next battlefield for the automotive firms. So, and this would even eat up 10 to 15% of the sales. What if electric vehicles are here already and they are becoming viable and competitive? If we address stricter emission regulations, low battery costs, there will be availability of charging infrastructures by 2030. Again, the landscape will change. This could even eat up 30 to 50% of car sales. But of course, the Philippines will be delayed again because of the lack of infrastructure for this. But this is again an opportunity for us. But ride sharing is here, my friends. And this is an emerging auto industry. Will you buy a car, or will you just go Uber? Or grab an Uber? See? So, the question is, these are already in front of us, and while the country still enjoy unit sales, there could be demand for vehicles that use the so-called TNVS or the Transport Network Vehicle Services units, no? So there could be a paradigm shift in mobility services along with new entrants. And this is more apparent with the increasing number of millennials. Remember, in the Philippines, we will have 35 million millennials by 2020, and there will be 385 million in Asia, living in Asia, and this is a big market for us, and this is already what they want. So the traditional automotive players will be challenged by this, and this will lead to shifting market positions in the evolving mobility industries, and this would even lead to further consolidation of the industry players. This is my take on these speed bumps. May happen, may not happen. It's going to happen. I just don't know when.
And I just also want to bring Serena into the conversation. The coffee industry may not be disrupted as much as the automobile industry from digital disruption, but you now have so many new local players and chains trying to take market share, and everybody trying to grow their own coffee all over Southeast Asia. Laos is a boutique player, producing only about 45,000 metric tons versus the world number 2, the world number 3 giants, Vietnam and Indonesia. How do you intend to battle, so many battles out there in light of the fact that you're seeking expansion, but it's becoming an increasingly crowded place, even though Starbucks has yet to serve coffee in Laos?
Yeah, you're right, Chloe. So competition is really, really increasing in Laos in the coffee industry. And talking about digital disruption, it is true. It has not impacted the coffee industry as much as the travel or banking and insurance industry, but still, it gives room for new and disruptive business models that can be applied in the coffee industry. Unfortunately, to apply these new business models, you have to have the right environment set up, right? So when we talk about disruptive technologies, we want to use the digital, we want to use e-commerce facilities. It can open doors to new market for us, for instance. But for that, let's be honest, so we have to have a very mature market in terms of internet. access to e-commerce banking system as well. This is not the case yet, but we're going into this direction in Laos. Currently, the private sector is pushing very hard with the government and the Chamber of Commerce and whoever is willing to listen to us to show that as long as the e-commerce infrastructure, the banking system, and also the logistic facilities are not implemented in the right way, we are at a blocking point, coffee industry or not, meaning that we are blocked to our domestic market and the direct neighbors market, Thailand, Vietnam, for instance. And if we want to reach wider markets, we need to make use of this digital disruption, but for that we need to have the framework. And luckily, if I want to speak for the women in Laos too, I came to meet a few women in this industry, and we are all very motivated to build something in this area. I also have a background in digital. Some other young female went abroad and studied about all this. They're seeing how it's happening in the US, in Korea, in Asia, and they want to make the same thing in Laos. We're just blocked by the infrastructure, but this is something that will happen very soon if we manage to get all together.
Yes, and Ms. Teresita Sikoson, you can probably write a book on crisis management and having dealt with the challenges in life because you've been through so many. As the world becomes more disruptive, does the management style or does your approach to strategy need to change? Because first of all, when you were setting up your first mall, you are facing a volatile economic and political backdrop with the Marcos regime that collapsed, the economy was in shambles, Benigno Aquino got assassinated, and yet you didn't go bankrupt. You continue to sail through. How do you approach that? Does the strategy need to change in the digital economy?
We were trained, I mean, we siblings were trained by our dad to really be contrarians. And I think that he built the shopping center during the economic crisis time. And when we first opened, there were only just about 8 tenants. And we have to beg some of them to come in. Some of them, of course, were friends and they come in. But after a while, it started us into the mall businesses. After that, you know, it was, we just go on and on and on. Now, and right now we have about 60-something malls. I know that some people were nervous for us because of the digital advancement. Well, you see, all of us are social beings, and we will always have to meet somewhere. And I hope that you do meet in our malls. So we will make our malls entertaining. It will be so we will have a lot of restaurants and other stuff that will make the social interactions more interesting. In terms of the digital area, I think in the future there will be fusions between the digital and the brick and mortar. I don't think it will be all purely digital, nor will it be purely brick and mortar. And so with that merge, I think that is where we are going to be. So we're going to have an exciting future.
Indeed, and even as the future continues to evolve for us, I think crisis management is a critical piece of puzzle for business leaders. And probably our panelists here went through far more than many of us in light of the fact that they've worked their butt off to get to where they are. When it comes to crisis management, Dr. Akhtar, you were the first central bank governor in Pakistan. You won numerous accolades for taming and spiraling inflation, instilling financial discipline, but in the face of an ineffective government, you were forced to negotiate a loan from the International Monetary Fund in the final year in 2008. That sucks. When in hindsight, what did you take away from that experience? And what advice can you give to all of our members of the audience and also everyone here?
Okay, you've clearly studied my history very well. I think one thing is quite clear. If you were to appoint women as governors of central bank, we would probably have more financial and macroeconomic stability is my But getting into a little in the story, I think the issue is that when you are, as a woman, involved in any businesses, as we have heard, or even in a public sector organization, the key thing that one has to understand is that you are not there because you think you are a woman or you're getting any special treatment, but to operate as a normal executive with the real skills that you have. And I think once you are able to illustrate your skill and competence, then you are able to also stabilize the markets quite a bit. Now, we had a rocky road period because there were 3 governments that changed during, that were instituted and got changed during my 3-year term in the central banking industry. And of course, it was a period when we had the opposition leader who came into country, and she was assassinated. So we had a massive exchange rate depreciation because of the market pressure, and the streets were burning as a result of some orchestrated attack on the businesses in the country. So you have to really remain calm within those very odd periods. But of course, you have to, the key thing is to be able to work with policymakers, because central banks have the hand on the pulse of the economy. And central banks have to really be effectively counseling the governments to have fiscal house in order. Because without fiscal monetary effective management, you're not going to be able to run either of the things, and the economy could go for a ride if you don't have that monetary fiscal coordination. So my biggest challenge was to actually be able to speak to my policy makers within the country to have much more effective macroeconomic policy coordination, and to remove the monetary policy, the fiscal subservience of the monetary policy. It's a bit technical, but this is a very difficult job. The second is to be very friendly to the industry, but keep an arm's length relationship, because in an environment where you're operating, you have to really go from weak regulatory frameworks to very strong regulatory frameworks, but those regulatory frameworks will not work if you don't have enforcement. So relationship management between the governor's office and the industry is extremely important in my view. And I think in that context, being a woman, in my environment, it was an added advantage because I was able to say, well, I can't go around. So that helped me in maintaining an arm's length distance, but I was also able to tour every corner of Pakistan, to be able to show the face and to talk about interest rates, because you talked about the IMF, and of course, with what was happening to the currency and what was happening to the prices, inflation went up to 25–30%. So I had to do a lot of explaining to public why interest rates have jacked up, because people always look at nominal interest rates, and these business ladies would know the difference between nominal and real interest rates. So there was a lot of education that I had to do with the businesses. And last point that I'd like to mention is we're talking about women entrepreneurs here and women economic empowerment. This was a big mission for me, because when I entered into the central bank, my first question, being from a development financing institution, being at the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, my first question was, how much of financial inclusion do we do? It turned out in the formal sector at that time, it was barely 500,000 for a population of 180 million. So to me, this was pathetic. And then I went all along to kind of nurture a development finance business area in the central bank, made sure all the bankers were given instructions to go all out for augmenting financial inclusion, and we adopted all the innovative approaches, settled the legal and regulatory framework, because there is a big question whether central banks should get involved in promoting micro finance businesses, because it's often felt that it's hard to regulate and supervise. But I introduced systems which have been then emulated by other countries too. I'm going to stop here because there are several aspects to that career period that I had. The 3 years were like 30 years.
I'm sure, and thank you so much for sharing that incredible experience. So this is where policy regulation and coordination becomes really important. Datuk, in your case, as the longest running CEO of SME Corporation, wielding huge influence over 98.5% of SMEs, in fact, SMEs number 98.5% of companies in Malaysia. How are you trying to level the playing field, given that the AEC can actually trigger any companies, disruptive or not, to jump ship, as in the case of Grab? And you also need to attract foreign investors and multinationals so that they create a thriving ecosystem for business.
It wasn't easy. 13 years ago, when I first was appointed as the CEO, there was no data. When you don't have data, you can't plan. When you can't plan, you can't manage. So the first things that we did was we had a census. I wanted to know how many SME population are there in Malaysia. So that was the first time in 2004 when we worked together with Department of Statistics and Central Bank, wanting to know the whole entire ecosystem of businesses establishments. Only then are we able to plan and to manage where the SMEs are, what are they doing, where they are, and how do we now manage them to overcome the challenges that we have. Now, interestingly, what we're seeing is the fact that, and I believe you me, it's not just peculiar to Malaysia, but it is also happening all across ASEAN countries, I believe. The challenges for the SMEs are the same. It's the depth of these challenges are different. All SMEs, all business establishments in particular, they are faced with the challenge of access to finance, access to technology, access to information, access to market, and not to mention access to skills as well as human resource. So when we went down and had a look at all these issues, only were we able to plan and see that our programs fit into overcoming those challenges. Next thing that happens is that we need to have a master plan. How do we chart the direction for our SMEs until 2020? And all these new technologies, Industrial Revolution 4.0 and the mega trends and others, what I've seen over the 13 years that I've gone through is that it had changed the whole entire landscape of doing business, which is today, business is unusual. It's no longer the brick and mortar game plan that we had 10, 15 years ago. And what we have got to do is, even the bankers, you've got to deal with them differently. We're looking now into bankable ideas. We're not looking into things that, forgive me, Governor, not looking into collaterals and deposits. We're looking into things that are something that can change the whole entire landscape. This week, what I'm having is that back in Malaysia, we are hosting, together with Huawei, for example, the hackathon. And this hackathon, we theme it as What the Heck? And it's called Crazy Ideas, but Big Change. We want to see the next Uber. We want to see the next Airbnb, because these local enterprises in Malaysia, in Philippines, wherever they are, they're going to be the next big companies, the next global enterprise.
And Serena, you are trying to build the next big coffee chain in Southeast Asia and beyond. Sino Coffee had to rebuild after the big coffee price crash of 2001. Today, you have different challenges. As a younger entrepreneur, a woman entrepreneur, you're trying to make your mark, but you're up against a big battle, which is the volume game. You've got a lot of people trying to compete with economies of scale. How are you trying to reconcile that dilemma?
Well, actually, so I think it's all also getting back to what everyone's saying about the digital industry, trying to get some disruptive business model and everything. I think now our focus is really betting on our people. Our people, meaning the young, the women. We are encouraging and supporting them into getting access to higher education as they are working with us too. So I want to say a concrete example, meaning that when we interview some young people, we see that they can have some potential with us and that they can help us grow our business. They are very interested in the coffee industry. They see how our brand is growing and they want to be involved in this. On the other side, some of them have weaknesses and they tell us that, but that's what we like to. By weaknesses, I mean that they say that they are motivated to join the company because they need to work. They are very honest, you know, they are at this level. And we take that because they are young, they are motivated, and we want to accept them in our company. And really, we were talking about capacity building, right? Build high capacity in our company in order to have all the human capital in our company and being able to be outstanding market players in the coffee industry. So we are supporting these people. This is our motto. Currently, one of the example I like to mention is that we are supporting women who want to get access to higher education as they are working with us, meaning that during the day they can work with us, and after work they continue to go to school, whichever they like, and we support that. It's a kind of scholarship or a light MBA program, if you like, during 1 to 2 years, depending on the discipline that they would like to learn. And we are encouraging that because they are still working with us, but they continue to learn and use their learning to help us improve our company thinking. And we only use local talent for that. And so hopefully, I mean, besides from the market, growing the market and innovating on the products and promoting Lao coffee, we also hope to have the relevant and the skilled resources to help us grow and build our brand in ASEAN markets.
Yeah, and in terms of crisis management, I think, Teresita C. Constant, you probably had it the worst or the best. You probably had in crisis management. About a decade ago, you led a series of acquisitions that turned SM Investments into the top Philippine conglomerate that it is today. But at the same time, you were battling an inner struggle. You lost your husband to an illness. From a leadership perspective, what advice, what did you take away from that experience? Because on a day-to-day basis, people in leadership positions are trying to fight gazillion battles, but something always strikes you in a very hard way. And I remember after reading your family story, your history, it must have been such a tough time. And here you are today, still standing, still shining, still representing Philippine Inc.
No, anyway, after any crisis, life must go on. And I have 3 kids, so life has to go on for them. So I just continue working. And at this time, since I have a lot of time for myself, so I just focus in business. And I guess if you spend more time in the business and you work hard, I guess you somehow will be rewarded somehow. I mean, somewhere. So I guess it's, but no, crisis will always come. But it's a matter of how you look at life. And I mean, it has been some time ago. Right now, the main focus are my family, whether my parents, my siblings, or my kids, and also the family. I mean, also the business, and the people who have been working with us. I guess it's a whole teamwork at this point. So it's not my own. It's not my own work alone. It's everybody working toward a certain target.
Just want to get also quick comments from the entire panel on how you empower women from their own perspective. So in your case, Faye, you jumped into an industry completely dominated by men, excuse me, and you managed to really make something out of yourself. What advice would you have for men or women who might be facing a similar situation, jumping into an industry that they might be gender challenged, and yet the odds seem totally stacked up against them in terms of the distribution, those revenues that you were looking at initially? How can people change their life, and what would you want to tell them? Just very quickly, just about a minute, everybody.
Okay, so when we talk about how I love crisis, because when there is crisis, it means business is good. Okay? So that's very important for me, because otherwise there's no challenge anymore. My advice to women here is, first, forget about that we are in interesting times or we are in challenging times. In our last strategic planning conference, I heard the word VUCA. We are in VUCA times, meaning we are in volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times. And I love that. And if I were to recreate the brand, I would go, then a woman must be a VUCA tea bag. You'll never know her strength until you put her in hot water. Okay. And then, can I ask the gentleman here, do you believe in the power of your mother? Told you, right? So, women here are already empowered. So empowered women must empower women. And those of us, non-women, you continue to inspire us so we can become more empowered. And I tell you, because I take the mother as the center, because that's what GDP does not measure. If you put care in the labor market, they pay you. But then I realized, but what about my mother who has not received a single paycheck in her life? Is it because she just finished grade 6? I said, no, because there is no such thing as care at home is equal to X dollar. So when care at home is not measured by GDP, it will just show that really the value of women is so different and is immeasurable. So to all of you here, a final takeaway is that for me, empowerment is no longer a buzzword. It must not be a buzzword. I think we just look for balance of power, because I believe that there is no gender inequality.
Thank you. And Dr. Akhtar, would really appreciate it if you could speak from your heart how you want to empower women in Pakistan. Their realities are so distant from yours, because Pakistan is considered one of the most dangerous places to live for women, and a lot of them face child or forced marriage, domestic violence, and even honor killings. What would you tell your fellow countrywomen in terms of how they can change their lives?
I'd like to bring in all stressful countries, because Asia Pacific as a whole has almost 20 hotspots, or even more than that, which also includes Myanmar and other countries. It is important that we push these countries towards what United Nations has been able to adopt, and it's called 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. For all of those who may not have heard about it, it's a massive new paradigm of development that is being promoted by United Nations. And this agenda has been adopted by full 199 or whatever membership that we have unanimously. And it has about 17 sustainable development goals. It's an integrated development agenda where you are not just looking at economic growth, but you are actually looking at economic, social, and environmental dimensions in an integrated manner. And within these 17 goals, you have a very focused goal on gender equality and empowerment. The reason why I'm giving you this architecture, because there is no one magic solution to having a more holistic transformation of policies or approaches to the women as a whole. So you have to really be looking at having direct intervention to support and uplift women, but you also have to clean up the environment because it impacts women more badly, and you have to also make sure they are educated, they have high quality health. So it's an integrated agenda in that context. This agenda was adopted in 2015, and it is not only the Sustainable Development Goals, but it includes how do you produce the means of implementation to implement this agenda. And by that, you mean, really, do you have the right statistics on women? Where are they located? What are the disadvantages they face? And then are you providing financing? So gender budgeting is very important within that context. To conclude, recently Secretary General, who is a relatively new Secretary General, has actually set up a panel for economic empowerment of some very accomplished panelists, and hopefully with their work we should be able to get the word out more substantially on economic empowerment.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Teresita C. Costa, once upon a time, you used to try to sell shoes to customers as a young child. There are still lots of little young girls out there in the Philippines trying to change their families' lives and change their own. What would you tell them?
I guess I've been hearing a lot of talks about gender equality or inequality. Thank you. About gender, there's a lot of talk about gender equality or inequality. Well, there's a lot of inequality in the world, like race inequality, countries inequality, trade inequalities. There are just too many of them. As far as women are concerned, my thoughts are just focus on what you want to do. Forget about inequality. Just determine what you want to do, focus on that. And if you see all my co-panelists, they all have a lot of knowledge. And you know, what is important is the knowledge, the hard work, and the determinations for you to reach the goal. So forget about the inequality issue. Of course, it can also help in terms of health, financial access, or even in peace and security, like ending violence against women, because that will give them more confidence and to do their work in order to contribute in the public sectors as well as in the private sectors. You know, they can give them the confidence to contribute to the society. Other than that, we just focus on our work. You know, the world is made of men and women, and that differences are the ones that make things more interesting, because we approach the solutions from different angle. So I think we just focus on our work, and it doesn't matter whether there's inequality in your environment.
And Datuk, once upon a time, you were also starting out in the civil sector. And what would you advise a lot of women in Malaysia who are looking up to you?
I remind myself that, as I said, in the education sector, 62% of graduates are women. And then these women are intelligent, they've got the right skills, they've got the right knowledge. And I remind myself what Michelle Obama said. You educate a child, you educate a girl, you actually develop a nation. So I would say, go for education, bring them to get the right skill sets, the right knowledge, because with the right knowledge, with the right skill sets, you can match any man.
Thank you. And also Serena, as a young woman entrepreneur, trying to get a Laotian brand onto the international stage, you are in a unique position to hire people and empower their lives. How do you want to use your clout and status?
Okay, so let me reuse 3 words that Teresa was using. So you have to have competencies, determination, and hard work. And I would add one more, which is confidence. If you show confidence, you trust yourself, other people will trust you as well. So this is something that I have experienced myself, that I can see amongst the people that I hire, of course. And I think that if you find the right people who can trust in your project, it will open doors for a lot of things. For that, I know that it's not easy. And for me, one of the prerequisites will be to set up enabling environment where women feel comfortable sharing their stories, weaknesses, project with other women, and get some feedback and see if they're alone or not, if the idea is eventually marketable or not, at a small scale or larger scale. I think that will really help to open doors to these women who don't feel confident enough, who underestimate themselves and think that they are not able to do these things because they have not graduated or because they are just following their husband in some country. Well, I know a lot of women like this.